Howdy, guys. So, is today's church on the wrong mission? Check this out.
Nowhere in the Bible does Jesus ask us to build the church. Jesus says, make disciples, sow into people, plant in people's lives, water souls. And Jesus says again and again, I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail. I will build my church. We get this backwards. We live in a day where many churches and many leaders and many disciples are trying to build the church, and the church ends up looking more like the empire than the kingdom. What happens when we try to make the church great, we rarely get disciples. But when we make disciples, we always get a great church.
All right, you might be listening to that and saying, amen. You know, it's like we need to get on this mission of discipleship. But look, if you guys were to be totally objective and just investigate the current church today, what would you conclude is the mission that we're on? If we see how much of our effort goes towards building churches versus disciple making, I think that it'd be very easy for someone who is just looking at what we're doing to conclude that obviously the mission of the church is to build churches, to plant churches, to grow churches. That is the point of the church. There's a tension there we really need to tease out. Discipleship.org did a famous survey where they discovered that less than 1% of pastors believe they are, quote, currently doing a great job at disciple making. Do you realize how strange that is? If you really believe this is the main mission, to say 99% of pastors feel like we're not doing a great job at the one primary mission that we're called to do, we need to have a very clear thesis for why this is happening. And there is a specific thing that we're not really facing. And I want to kind of dive into this for a minute here with you guys. And that is that we're not facing the fact that there is a natural tension between these two efforts, the effort to grow, build, plant churches, and the effort to multiply disciple makers. There's a tension here, right? And that's why 99% of pastors feel they are not doing a great job. It's because 99% of the time, when these two missions collide, everything that's designed around building the church is who has to win that collision versus disciple making. We've designed a system that systematically favors church building over disciple making. That is the reason why this is happening. And if we continue to build this system and invest in this system, when there is a tension, we're going to go with church building, church growth, then we're always going to have this problem. We're never going to get over this. We have to decide which of these two missions is preeminent. Part of what we really try to do at 1,000 Houses is dive into this question. How do we get back on mission? And isn't the church a natural byproduct of disciple making? In other words, if we focused our attention on the mission that Jesus actually created, Jesus came to create a movement of disciple makers. And as these disciple makers are on mission together, the community that they form is the church. Like that's the ecclesia, the church is the community that is the natural byproduct of disciple making. You guys, if you start with church building, you're not necessarily going to get to disciple making, but if you focus on disciple making, you will get the church. Like the church will emerge. And there's ways in which we do need to structure the church, and there's a huge conversation around that, but there is a chicken and the egg problem here. And that is if you start with church building, you don't necessarily get to disciple making. I'm going to give you guys 3 quick examples for how we could really shift this relatively quickly if we decided to put disciple making first. Okay, the first is that most churches don't track disciple making at all. I mean, they are very careful to track the money that comes in. They're very careful to track the attendance. But if you were to go to most pastors and say, what's your average attendance? What's your annual budget? They would probably be able to quickly answer those questions. And then, of course, if you ask the question, how many disciples were made this year? What percentage of your church are actively, annually making disciples? What generation is your disciple-making efforts routinely getting to? Is it getting to just the second or third? Is it getting the fourth or fifth generation? In other words, if a disciple makes a disciple, does it multiply, or does it just sort of start? Is it more of a one generation kind of thing? Those are really, really basic questions, very easy to track. It would take very little effort, but the vast majority of pastors and church leaders don't know the answer to those basic questions. And it demonstrates, you guys, that they don't really believe that this is the mission. They're tracking the things they believe is the mission. And so I think if we wanted to begin to see this, we would need to track this. One of the things you probably noticed on this podcast is anytime I get people that are involved in disciple-making movements on the podcast, I will ask them to please tell me any movements currently in the U.S. or anywhere in the Western world that are routinely getting to the fourth generation. And I'm constantly getting the answer. If you've been listening to the podcast, you've heard me ask this question from people whose job it is to research and understand disciple-making movements. And often they'll almost always say, I don't know, I really can't tell you, Jeremy, any that are getting to the fourth generation. I think 100% of churches that are faithful should have a disciple-making effort that is routinely getting to the fourth generation. And I cannot find any. Like I think it's really, I know this is like, I'm putting a lot of explanation points here, but it's like, you got to understand how strange this is. Jesus came to start a disciple-making movement, and the people, we are an incredibly wealthy, powerful movement in America and in the Western world of Christians. There is so much money, so much effort, so many incredibly well-trained and well-intentioned followers of Jesus. And this is such a bizarre problem to say that we can't find any movements that are routinely getting to the fourth generation. If you know of any, please reach out to me, talk to me. I want to get them on the podcast. Okay, that's the first thing. Is we don't track. We do not track. We don't keep track of this. If you don't keep track of it, what you measure is what gets the focus, and we got to start measuring this. Second thing is we don't celebrate it. And you can do this. One of the things that we try to do annually is to do a big disciple-making celebration where we actually put all the stats up there, where we highlight what's going on with disciple-making within our church community. And it's important to understand that this particular ministry is hidden. And so when you walk into a church building and you see, hundreds of people, there's a sense of movement. There's a sense of accomplishment. There's a sense that I'm a part of something that's important. And so you get that naturally from the attendance to a worship service, or if you go to a conference, or you go into a Sunday school class, or you're part of a small group ministry. There's a sense of how large this is. I get a sense of the scale of it. And for Western people today, we are obsessed with this question. We want to see things that are big and successful. And I think we're way too wired that way. But one of the things that we need to be really careful of is the disciple-making efforts are hidden. And you might have somebody in your church, for example, who is responsible for hundreds of people getting discipled in your city. It's actually smashed through the whole boundaries of the church because it's multiplying just naturally. They make 3 or 4 disciples a year who are making 3 or 4 disciples, and all of a sudden you've got 50, 100, 200, 500, 1,000 people being discipled. If we don't ever talk about that, if we're not tracking and then we're not celebrating what's happening there, if we just let it be hidden, then we're not going to be drawing the newer believers who we're training into this ministry. They're going to gravitate naturally towards the ministries they can see, and they want to be a part of something that actually feels like it's got momentum and it's having an impact. And so because disciple making is small and it multiplies kind of in a hidden way, you have to make that stuff explicit. You have to show those numbers. You have to share those testimonies. You have to create some kind of annual tradition of celebration if you want to see this done. And the third thing is we often don't know how. So sometimes you don't have a willingness problem. Sometimes people are like, I want to make disciples. I'm going to carve out time. I'm going to 5 hours a month, 10 hours a month, 20 hours a month. I'm going to put towards disciple making. I feel so convicted. But are you convinced that the method you're using is effective at both transformation and multiplication? That if you decide to invest in this ministry, you're going to see people's lives change, and you're going to begin to see a movement that's going to expand beyond the fourth generation. And if you cannot say yes to that answer, then you don't have an effective disciple-making blueprint that you currently are operating with. That is a problem that's very, very solvable. And so one of the things we do at 1,000 Houses is we have a blueprint called Life on Life Discipleship. We take you through a 3-month cohort. We get together twice a month for calls. We take you straight through an entire blueprint. And by the time it's done, you will have in your possession an effective blueprint for how to create disciples that multiply. So it both is focused on balancing transformation and multiplication. And we've thought about this a lot. We spent years and years iterating on the blueprints. There's great blueprints out there. We're not saying ours is the best or the only one. I couldn't find one that I felt like was properly balancing transformation and multiplication. And so now that we've watched people that have used this blueprint, it is reliably getting to the fourth generation within a couple of years. We want to be a part of this mission. Just going back to what this pastor in this clip was saying, we all need to be a part of the mission that Jesus has called us to. Let's not participate in what we often call the great reversal, where we have exchanged the mission of disciple making for the mission of church building. Like, we need to get this right. We need to get this in the right order. Don't reverse the order of those two things. Start with disciple making, and you will give rise to a healthy, amazing church expression. Start with church building, and you will almost inevitably be focused so much on that effort that you will sacrifice disciple making. We got to put first things first.